This will be polishing a granite plate which I previously honed. Link in the description to that video. And so this is the first experiment. I'll explain along the way, basically just testing the polishing paste, how to make it from primitive technology and the basic element of polishing granite. Okay, so firstly, how did I make my polishing mud? Well, you want really fine grit. Now, in previous experiments I'd been drilling and cutting using copper. Now that's the leftover abrasive, so it gets ground down. To cut as quickly and drill as quickly as you can, you do want a high grit abrasive. It's quicker for cutting, so you can see it's we still have pretty chunky grains in there. Originally I was taking this, again, like putting it in water and then putting it through a filter, and then that way the big grains of sand would stay behind, and in the muddy water they would go through. I found it was just much easier, quicker, and at least as effective, actually, a bit, because a lot of good mud will be trapped inside the cloth I was filtering it through. So I just take this stuff, I put it in water, swirl it around just to make the water grey. Let it settle for a moment, because all the heavy stuff, all the big grains are going to fall to the bottom, and all the really fine particles, the really tiny particles, are going to get they're going to float around in the water. Then just pour the water out. Always leave some water in there, because you only want the really fine stuff that's floating right at the top. Again, when you stir, just to let it settle a few seconds, so the heavy grains settle, just the really fine stuff is there, trapped in the water. And then you just let this settle. Now if you feel at the bottom, which you can't see obviously, there's no like grains of sand, it's just water in there. But if you let it settle, eventually it will be two layers of water, like dirty grey water will slowly sink to the bottom, and you'll have clean water on top. Then you can just pour that out back into this mix and repeat and go over again. So yeah, so when you were polishing, you want really fine grains, just like the automotive sandpaper for polishing the paint on cars, or whether you're polishing steel, iron, any metal, stone or wood, whatever you're polishing, sandpapering, you want really fine stuff to get a really good surface. And so I'll just put that to the, make sure I put a bit more, again, just stir it up, just let it go for a moment, just to let if there are any thick grains to settle at the bottom, and just take that top layer of water off. And then, yeah, just let that settle. And again, you'll have like a thick layer, a grey layer. You'll see two layers. One as the grey, very fine material settles and goes to the bottom, and clean water on top. And again, you can just pour that back in and just keep recycling. Now to polish, you only need a very small, you only need a tiny amount of mud, because the more you grind it, the more it's going to be cut into smaller and smaller pieces, which only helps in the polishing process. Unlike cutting or drilling, the large grit breaks down into small pieces, and that's not the fastest way if you want big chunks to cut fast. So grinding process, you don't need as much grit, and the more you grind it, the more it gives a desired result of fine grit to polish. So that's how you make it. This would also apply to like Kailasa Temple in India. Where is all the remains? I used to be curious, like, where did all the rubble go? Well, the rubble is valuable. It's a building material in itself. So for cutting and then later for polishing, the broken granite can be used to cut and polish the granite. Mohs hardness scale, like cuts like. Get two bits of granite, you rub them together, they're going to grind down. You don't need diamond, you don't even need corundum. The stone you are working with gives you the material you need to work the stone. It's a beautiful cycle, and it cancels each other out. So that's how you make your mud. I'll put a link in the previous video, but also showed. So this mud, I haven't filtered this yet. I was using this mainly for the drilling, so there's a lot of copper in there, and so you can, just by panning it out, you can get your copper back again. So you're recycling the material. What you bring in to start with is pretty much only the material you need to carry on with. So whether it's your copper, you only bring in so much. When you cut, when you drill, you just recycle, grab your copper back, just by using the water and washing it out. And the building rubble is the building material for late. So first you have big chunks of rubble. When you're breaking out big bits, you collect the dust, you collect the small pieces, then you can use that for cutting. And then as those pieces get ground down even further, you have a material for polishing, and very simple process. So that's how you do it. It's a tub where I just poured in the water to separate the grain. Now it will take a little while to settle, but you can already see that there is a layer of clean water and that the grit is starting to settle, and which will give you your very fine mud. So that was just dirty grey water, no large grit, and you can see it's already, so that'll settle down, and then eventually you get a type of, it's not even a mud, you call it a paste for polishing. So that's, and now I could pour that, I'm going to let it settle a little bit more, but I can pour that clean water off back into the waste grit. Again, it's not waste, and then just recycle. And as this goes down, I'll get a tub of mud. But to do polishing, you only really need a small amount, because the more you grind it, the smaller the particles, better the polish result.
So here we see I mixed the tub again. I let it settle for a couple of hours, and so it was all just muddy water, but you can see the clear water section, and then you can even see the differences in the colour between the layers, as the coarsest or the heaviest particles will settle first and they'll settle at the bottom, and the finest particles will settle at the top. So you just spoon them off, just take off that top layer, and you get your really fine particles, which are so important in the polishing. Now even the fine stuff at the bottom, I call it, it is coarser, but it's still quite fine. I found that it turns into like a clay, but at the top, those particles that settle, it's not even a mud, it's more like a liquid, because they're so fine, those particles. So when you the building materials, the dust and all the grinding abrasive that's left over, just mix it up in a tub. Initially I was trying to filter it through a cloth, but I think this method, it's quicker, it's easier, and because of the way that it settles, it actually leaves, you can choose to pick just the finest particles at the very top. So just an illustration of how to get the polishing paste, and it is a very, very fine paste.
Okay, so so actually this portion here I did earlier, just mucking around. I didn't film it, but the polish we can start to see is here. So this is just the first experiment. I just wanted to test the waters as it goes, and I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but okay, just by rubbing it by my fingers, you have this honed part, and you can hear it. Now if you go to the polished part, there's virtually no sound. Now that's a polish, not a sealer being applied. So again, you can see how the reflection is only in that polished part. It won't come onto the honed portion. So see how the reflection will only carry through to that part where I've polished it. Now just as a reminder again, I only honed this to get it to flatness, so you still see that pitting, and that's a sort of same effect you'll see in, for instance, the Serapeum. Even that has not been ground down to a proper hone. It's still full of pitting, but there's the reflection starting to come up. You can just see out the dark spot. Again, this was only about 35-40 minutes of polishing. I only did it with a small block, so you do twice the area with a larger block. Or if you had a bigger piece, you could do it just the amount of area. So you could cover, again, just by using a larger polisher, you cover a much larger area. So just as an idea, so there's the reflection, and this is not a fine polish by any sense. You know, I could do better. I just wanted to, again, sort of first experiment, and just to test the polishing paste that I made, and just to go along with that theme. So it's not just about the polishing, it's how to make, you know, using the most primitive of techniques and materials to create that polish paste as well, and recycling previous materials that I used in cutting and grinding and drilling as well. So I'll do more in the future. Firstly, I'll get another plate ready to go, and I'll polish that to a high polish. And I started prepping, so I got a block here, and that's got all the curves and stuff, and I just got to grind that down because there's still a lot of, so it's like a surface layer on it. You can see that sort of reddish there, and I'm just grinding it down to get to the grey material underneath. I'm not sure whether that's a metamorphic or just proper granite, but it's in that family of stone, and because of all the curves and bends, I'll do that as an example of polishing those corners. It's just the same thing, and using wood I think would be the option, because the wood will grind to meet the contours and stuff, but eventually it's to, you know, try and polish something with more curves and give it that Moorian high polish. But yeah, just the first one, and just to go through the, you know, how did I make the polishing paste, and whether to use wood or leather or a stone polisher would be some more interesting experiments, but that's it for this one, just an intro. And I forgot to mention, so you see where that reflection is, but it won't carry on to the honed parts, and you can see on one of the Serapeum boxes on the inside where what I mean by that is, so the reflection is only going to be on those polished parts, but you won't find it on the honed, you know, so you can see whether it's the lighter grey where it hasn't been polished, the reflection won't carry over. But if you, so just like, you know, you're not going to get a reflection on this part where it's the lighter grey. But one way, like a sealer they call it, or a colour enhancer, so you can get this unpolished granite and apply this sealer to it. In the ancient times they used different, you know, like lacquers or oil to do that, but now you do have a reflection. Okay, so that's the Serapeum, almost certainly have had a sealer applied to it, because they're not, just by the surface of it you can see that they haven't been polished, because here I've polished it, but in all the little pits, all those little low points, that doesn't have the polish, so they would have had to have gone in with a toothpick and get it in there, but more likely, because you can even see sometimes, like there's a sort of residue dripping off one of them, that a sealer has been applied. But that's a true polish, and again I'll get a nicer block, prepare it properly, and get like a really high quality polish on it. This has just been initial an experiment. So honed is the light grey, the wet look or the sealer is what it would look like there, and then we have the polish, and once the polish comes up nicer, the light grey versus the going towards the black will be more apparent.